next question that I wanted to ask had to do with just a general overview of what propane retailers were dealing with this past winter. So, between the pandemic and volatile weather, I think it was an unusual season to say the least. But from your perspective, how would you characterize the supply and the pricing conditions that they were facing compared to prior seasons?
Well, we had plenty of inventory as we started the season. Of course, as I talk about all the time, we're not investing in the logistical needs to really service retail propane like we used to, and that creates a situation where we get some tightness in the market, even when we're well supplied at the hubs, Mont Belvieu and Conway. We can have those situations downstream of those that we can get some tight supply. And we also saw this year that one of the things that probably tightened it up a lot in the Midwest is we saw Canadian producers not sending as much propane to the United States as they have in the past. They were really setting up to move propane to Asia where they can get a better net back. And they really cut back about 1.4 million barrels of supply to the U.S. So that tightened up the Midwest. Now, going into the winter, I mean, we had a really low pricing environment because the pandemic had driven all the prices down for crude, and that pulled propane prices down. So, we were looking pretty good going into winter. But as we got into the second half of winter, things really started tightening up, and you really saw like when we started out the winter here, we were running in October 52 cent propane. That's what we averaged in October. We averaged 55 cents in November, 65 cents in December. So you see we're starting to feel a little pressure. Now, part of the reason for that is that we dropped inventories in 2020 by around 7 million barrels. So that tells you that the fundamental picture for propane is really starting to tighten up. And you're beginning to see that reflected. So even though you started in at a really low price into winter, we were looking really good. You can already see in the fourth quarter of 2020, we're starting to see that upward pressure on pricing. And then you get into 2021 and you get the really strong winter storm, and we just saw everything take off. Obviously, Conway really took off. So if we look at January, we averaged around 87 cents. In January, we averaged 91 cents in February, and we had averaged 92 cents in March. Now, that's 3 times where we were in March of last year, because that was right at the beginning of the pandemic. So if you're just kind of getting, that your gut feel for the propane market is, wow, we're really high, we're really spiking, we're really getting high, and it certainly felt that way. But just to kind of put it in perspective just a little bit, kind of how we did, we wound up averaging 73.74 cents during the winter months, October to through March, because that's what we averaged. Now, that compares to 43.46 cents the previous winter. So we're up 30 cents. So if you're only thinking about very short term, then it felt like we were in a really upward swinging price environment, and we certainly were compared to the previous winter. But that 73.74 compares to an average winter price of 73.13 the previous winter. So we really kind of just got back. We kind of pulled ourselves out of the whole, oversupply pandemic thing, and we kind of got ourselves a little bit more back to normal. But we're continuing to see upward pressure on prices at this point. Overall, I think we had plenty of supply at the hubs. It definitely tightened up, and you saw that reflected in prices. We certainly had some logistical issues. I think the lack of propane from Canada certainly had an impact on the Midwest market and tightened things up a lot there. But overall, while it seemed a lot more very bullish, it wasn't. It was kind of getting more back to normal, really.
Okay, yeah, I had an update from the Energy Information Administration. It came across my inbox this morning, and it said that retailers faced the highest residential price increase during this past winter since the 2013-2014 polar vortex winter. So I was wondering if you could just, quickly review the factors that went into that significant price increase that you talked about compared to that winter that was really memorable in propane retailers' minds still.
Well, I think for the first time in a long time, we got some winter. I mean, we really, I mean, we had one of the strongest cold fronts that we can recall, certainly in the South, and so that does two things. That it really increases demand, but in this case, it was a double dip, because what we did is we really hurt supply at the same time. And what you saw is the really cold weather. It's one thing to have the really cold weather in the north, where we're used to it and we can deal with it. It's an entirely different situation to have this really cold weather in the southern part of the United States. And that was kind of what made this more unique, and kind of drove us like you would have in what you'd considered a really, really strong winter. Now we got to remember, this winter was still below normal in terms of heating degree days. So it's not like, that we had this just really tremendous winter. It's just we had a combination of a very strong cold front that got so deep into the United States that it really impacted the supply side as well. So obviously we have to have our fractionators running to be able to get propane supply. And when those fractionators started going down, and then the oil and gas wells started freezing up, and refineries started shutting down, well, all of our sources for propane were drying up. So at the very moment we really needed it, we're losing the supply side of it as well. So I think that was what made this particular winter particularly unique in the way it played out.